Hi, this is Coach Dan Williams with Character Advantage, and I want to speak parent to parent. So if you're a parent watching this video right now, I'm speaking to you specifically. And I want to talk to you about passion. One of the things that I've discovered on my journey with my athlete as a parent is how passion is a key driver. It's what I am experiencing as a parent on the sideline. My passion is bringing me joy, but there's times when my passion is also bringing me the opposite of joy. It's bringing me heartache, it's bringing me concern. And I see it in my athlete as well. As they're pursuing their sport, passion is what's driving them. But also passion without a guide can also inhibit them, can hold them back from their true potential. Because that's the challenge, isn't it, as a parent? We see the potential in our player. We see that ceiling that they have not even gotten close to reaching. And so with that comes the passion to pursue and develop their potential. And what a joy it is when they begin to experience success and they begin to see that they are making progress and developing their potential. As they're developing that, passion is a great fuel. But passion can also be something that we have to be concerned about as a parent. We have to look for those warning signs like they're becoming really rigid. They're becoming a perfectionist in everything that they're doing. Because the reality is that with that rigidity and with that perfectionism, you can become so obsessed with what you're doing that you lose all the joy that it brings. You begin to only focus on the things that you haven't done well. You only focus on those things that you have to do because of the pressure, because you want to perform at your best and you want to be perfect in everything. And when passion begins to move in that direction, it can be obsessive, and that athlete begins to lose touch with really reality that's around them. They begin to live in a different world that is not healthy. And as a parent who loves their player, who wants only the best for their player, this is a dangerous area to be in. And so what do we do about it? How do we survive in a very competitive environment? How do we help our player maximize their potential, but not fall into the pitfalls of becoming obsessed? Well, that's a challenge that's not easy, and you need a guide. One of the things that I began to realize on this pathway that I was on with my player is that I needed to begin to identify the values that were going to keep us centered in everything that we did. And that's what I began to identify. What were the values that they had? What were their values? How could I begin to help them refine what those values were? How could I begin to help them develop those values in their training? How could I begin to help them see those values lived out when they were competing? Or even begin to help them realize when they weren't living up to their own values in competition? Those were the things that I began to realize were my role as a guide, to help them identify what their values were. Because see, when we begin to understand what our values are, we begin to move away from just performance for performance sake, and we begin to move towards purpose. And purpose is a much better anchor for when we're in that performance journey, because the ups and downs, the journey is so chaotic that sometimes we can lose our way without purpose. Now, when I begin to help my player identify their purpose, I begin to see different stages. So we had values, we knew what they would look like, but I began to see one stage where they had no values and they didn't understand how values could have any impact in their journey as a player. Then I began to see another stage where they began to understand and began to experiment with those values that we were talking about, and they began to transform in their understanding of those values. They didn't always live up to them. In fact, sometimes they did the opposite of what we had talked about when it came to that value. The attitude that they were expressing in that moment was almost in opposition to that value. But actually, that was a good thing in that they began to recognize that for themselves. Then the third phase was when I began to see they began to express and own those values. Those values were now no longer just words to them. They were things that really defined them as an athlete. And it not only defined them as an athlete on the field, but it began to define them as an athlete off the field. Those are three different phases I began to realize that you guide your player and your athlete through. Now, why is all this important? Because the reality is, if our only focus is on wins, well, we're going to be disappointed a lot of the time. Because no one wins every game. No one wins every match. No one wins every race. There's a lot more failure on the journey. And how do we overcome those failures? How do we work through those failures? If your only focus is on performance, you're going to ride up and down on a roller coaster. You're going to be like a ship who's lost at sea, being thrown around by the waves of emotions up and down, side to side. But if you have a purpose, it gives you a North Star. And if you have a value system, it begins to help you chart your course so that you can kind of navigate through those seas. And just because somebody else has navigated through those seas doesn't mean that you're going to be able to navigate through those seas. Because for every journey, every parent, every player, it's uncharted territory. You're moving into uncharted territory. Now, my role as your guide is just simply to say, I can't tell you how your journey is going to go, but I've learned some truths. And one of the truths that I've learned is you have to have a map. You have to have a course that you've set. And identifying your values, beginning to know what those values look like and being thoughtful in what those values look like, expressed either different than what you'd hoped as they begin to transform and as they begin to expand beyond what you'd hoped. All of those phases, helping you begin to understand that so that you know where you are on your course, so you can begin to set that course, and that course can be like a map for you. Now, I'm here to be your guide, but parent to parent, that's your role, is to be the guide for your player, for your athlete. And I want to help you be the best guide that you can be. And that's what Character Advantage wants to do for you. So if you haven't already done so, join this channel. Make sure you like this video. And I want to hear from you. How can I specifically help you on your journey? I'm here to do that because I want you to help your athlete discover how character can be their advantage.